God surrounded himself with archangels. Among them was Lucifer, the bearer of light. Instead of being the paragon of supernatural evil, Satan was a figure against which mere men measured themselves.
They had become convinced that the devil was present.
Satan isn't a demon or even a bad angel. He doesn't live in hell.
The presence of Satanism and related activities has surfaced in society.
Modern.
Satan was taken up as a hero, an admirable rebel against authority. There was this admirable rebel against authority. An admirable rebel.
The presence of Satanism.
A Satanist priest. I believe somebody that's doing this habitually is influenced by satanic pressures.
Hello, welcome to Modern Satanism. My name is Reep. I'll be your host, and hopefully I'll make a good first impression on you. First of all, I'm a priest with the Satanic Temple. You'll find no hocus pocus or magic spells. We won't be covering demons or sacrificing any animals. No babies will be harmed either. It's actually pretty impressive considering I'm also an atheist. So between eating babies and sacrificing them, I'd say it'll be pretty amazing. No babies get harmed during this podcast. You will also sooner or later notice that Satanism is represented a bit differently from the Anton LaVey version. While I have respect for Anton's work, the Church of Satan was founded in 1966. It's not 1966 anymore. And it seems to be kind of caught in a time warp where it refuses to progress. And it refuses to acknowledge some of the issues that need to be taken care of. And it chooses to kind of sit on its hands and wait for others to bring about change. Or maybe just wish hard enough for it. Or work for it in secret ways that aren't working very well, obviously. And not to say they're wrong, they have their own way of doing things, but let's just say the version of Satanism represented here is a bit more active socially and responsible socially. I'd like to pause right now and say hello to Peter Gilmore in case he listens to this podcast. Hello, Peter. It's good to know that you're listening instead of talking. I'm calling this podcast Modern Satanism because we live in a modern time. Science and technology, along with the changes in social attitudes, religion has always had a major flaw that has helped lead to its demise. It's chained to strict rules and a book. I've got nothing against books, but when you write down the rules, you better be sure they are what you want and you can stick with them. If you look at our legal system, the Constitution we have isn't stuck. We aren't stuck with it. We can make changes to it. It's fluid. Despite some serious and obvious flaws, we have been able to make changes to assure that people are treated fairly and are not discriminated against. There's still work to be done, but at least we know we can do that work. We can modify our laws, create laws, remove laws. Our government is flexible. Not as flexible as I'd like, thanks to John Boehner, but it works pretty well, considering. The Satanic Temple has its tenets, very basic guidelines. I think it's safe to say, if those resulted in any negative effects on society or people, or were harmful in any way, they would be adjusted accordingly. Our Satanism is based on common sense and science, along with the tolerance of alternative lifestyles or other lifestyles different from our own, and the equal treatment of all people, because people shouldn't be judged or discriminated against simply because of the way they were born. This podcast will bring you information about the Satanic Temple and its current activities, as well as news about and involving Satanism, atheism, and skepticism. I'm not going to claim to be the be-all, end-all to Satanism. I'm not going to claim to own the word or to know the definition for everyone. I know the definition for me, and that's what will be represented here. I'd like to thank Lucien Greaves and the Satanic Temple for supporting this podcast. I will do my best not to let them down. I realize there are different types of Satanism. People have different types of beliefs, and I don't have a problem with that, unless you insist on including the supernatural, magic, or fantastic beliefs or imaginary beings. I don't have any tolerance for that. If you're going to make those claims, then you had better be able to back them up, because if you can't, there's no place for them. We live in a place called reality. We need to deal with real issues, real subjects, real people. We need to use logic, we need to use reason, and we need to embrace science. We don't need to try and force magical beliefs or fairies or unicorns or demons or angels. Anyone who has a criticism of the show or my position or anything that I've said is more than welcome to come on the show and present their own opinion, and we can go from there. I'm more than willing to have a discussion with anyone about anything. Now, for any of you listeners who are new to Satanism, feel free to sit back, relax, take in the information, consider it, and then do what you will with it. I would ask that you share the podcast, pass it around. The podcast is new. No one knows about it yet, so you'll be the first one to tell everyone about it. Lucky you. I'll thank you in advance for that. Let's jump into the first interview that I did for the Modern Satanism podcast, and that was with, who else? Lucien Greaves, the spokesman for the Satanic Temple.
When we first started the Satanic Temple, I was hoping to stay in the background and not ruin my name and reputation by being the face and voice of it all. But you really can't groom somebody to, take the positions, and you really have to, you genuinely have to know the topic. And when it became apparent that there was going to be this much media attention and that, we were going to need to be answering questions on the fly, it was just impossible that I could prep somebody else just to take as a buffer from those of us, running the Satanic Temple. I have to say, I'm pleased with the way things have turned out in general. I expected much worse. That's another thing about this too, is people get this idea that it's all fun and games and for laughs, and if they knew the horror of the idea of jumping into this kind of thing and being attached to it, like I said, I was expecting much worse. Much worse.
Yeah, I guess we should talk a little bit about some of the critics. There's another one. I keep finding these people that are saying that you're just trying to garner attention, or just attention needy, and it's all just trolling, and you don't represent Satanism well, and it's just they don't really have a basis for saying it, but I keep seeing it repeated.
Well, I'm sure they do have a basis for saying that we don't represent Satanism well, because they have their differing conception of Satanism, or even if they don't want somebody else being a prominent spokesperson, because there's a shortage of people who want to do that themselves. But when people are talking about just doing things for attention, or just trolling, or those kinds of criticisms, I'm not even sure where to begin with that, because obviously we are using media attention to draw attention to issues, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to raise consciousness, people are going to have to see what's going on. If you're going to start raising issues, you want these issues to be discussed, and you want them publicly exposed. But I guess the idea, if people are saying it's just for the media or just trolling, is that it's attention grabbing for its own sake, where the end game is strictly the attention that it's garnering, and not really towards drawing attention to issues. By now, I'm thinking that criticism is seeming a little bit more ludicrous. But I don't really mind those criticisms so much, because I still feel that I know that we're in it for the long haul, and the more we do these things, I think the less credible those claims become, but we'll be vindicated as we move forward and carry on. It's just odd to me that those same criticisms aren't ever really attached to anybody else doing the same thing. It's still all part of the same issue of a minority or outcast voice asserting itself, and everybody assuming that it's just intended to be provocative. It just shows that level of preference that people are so inured with that they take it for granted that nobody else has a place. And even to try such a thing is nothing more than a reactionary attempt to provoke the other side. I mean, who looks at the Ten Commandments monument in Oklahoma that way? You'd think there'd be an uproar from people saying that they're just trying for attention, or they're just trying to impose their will and that kind of thing. And even there is that kind of outcry too, to a certain point, but certainly not to the level we've seen with people. But like I said, the horror of jumping into this kind of thing and knowing that it's really going to affect the rest of your life. There's no walking away from this for me. It has to work out. It has to. I have to be able to make clear that there's nothing to do with the criminal activity that Satanists have traditionally been accused of. To make clear where we're coming from, what our tenets are, and that kind of thing. It's a matter of life and death. It's nothing short of that.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that we're yucking it up and having a good time. I guess I'm almost flattered by that in a certain way.
You make it look easy. That's what it is.
Yeah. It makes me think we're making it look easy. We're making it look fun, and it should look that way too. It should be fun to the observer, even if it's not for us.
Yeah.
So, it's a mixed bag there.
And I don't hear you claiming to be the voice for all of Satanism either. I don't hear you putting down other satanic groups like the Church of Satan, or what is it, the Leviathan Church is the other one I was looking at today.
Yeah. Well, we started out not wanting to do that to begin with. Our focus was on this kind of political activity to promote the legitimacy of Satanism in general. So we weren't even concerned about micromanaging people's beliefs or disparaging even theistic Satanism or anything like that. We were just carving out a niche where we were showing that this is a viewpoint people have, and this conspiracy of satanic cults, roving through the landscape and murdering people left and right.
Grabbing babies as you run through the countryside.
Yeah. They've never existed. So, you're going to have to start judging people for who they are and where they are. And most satanic organizations have taken the lead of the Church of Satan, which is really dedicated itself to strictly defining what Satanism is and trying to hold a monopoly on that. Yeah. And, you have Peter Gilmore is the arbiter of what is and what isn't Satanism, but it doesn't get you very far. It's just kind of fomented this culture in which now all these groups are trying to maintain a monopoly on what is Satanism, and they vehemently attack anybody else who's doing anything else, even if they're not directly contradicting anything they say or do.
Yeah.
So it is funny because the Church of Satan has always had this kind of policy where they don't acknowledge the other organizations. They don't, they don't bother to badmouth them. They feel it gives them too much credit. But that's been totally turned on its head since we're making so much progress.
I've noticed that too.
All kinds of negative essays written about us, and I think it's funny that the number of official dispatches we've put out, giving criticism towards any of these other satanic organizations has been zero.
Yep.
And I feel I'd like us to remain above that. Yeah. In fact, I was invited on an NPR show that I did just the other day, and I think it airs tomorrow or the next day. Should be aired by the time this airs. In any case, and it's some religious broadcast that generally aired on NPR. And they reached out to Peter Gilmore to see if he would have a discussion with me back and forth, something of a debate on their show. And, he wouldn't do it, but he would speak in separate interviews about us, apparently. And he hasn't been willing to debate so far.
Yeah, that's that kind of speaks to his position a little bit. If he's willing to talk about you, but not to you about you,
My favorite sound is modern Satanism.
Although the Satanic Temple is above criticizing other Satanists and other Satanist organizations for what they feel or believe, I'm not above that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play an interview that Peter Gilmore did on Interfaith Voices. Credit to them for the interview. This is a good example of what Lucien and myself were speaking about Peter being able to talk about, but not with, people he disagrees with.
It turns out that Satanism has some of the same squabbles that other religions have. In fact, this philosophy has what you might call denominations, and not everyone thinks a monument to Satan is a good idea. Here to give us this different view is Magus Peter Gilmore. He's the high priest of an older satanic group, the Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey in 1966. Welcome back to Interfaith Voices, Peter.
Oh, thank you for having me, Maureen. It's always a pleasure.
So when it comes to building this satanic monument at the Oklahoma State House, what's the official position of the Church of Satan?
Well, I'm opposed to any religious monument on public spaces. I'm a secularist, as are all members of the Church of Satan. What might be important to get across to your audience is first that they must understand that we are atheists. We are not devil worshippers. We do not support the devil. There's no faith in Satanism whatsoever. And where public grounds are concerned, we think that religion should be kept out of them, and that means all of them.
Do you think it emulates religion somehow?
Yes, absolutely. Satanism is really a secularist philosophy which has religious aspects. We don't venerate statues or put up idols. We think that each individual Satanist's life is the monument to how they have applied Satanism to bettering their lives. So we kind of see that as a pointless thing to indulge in. We think it's misleading to what Satanism actually promotes as a philosophy.
But you call yourselves the Church of Satan, but yet you say you aren't Satanists. I don't get it.
Satanism is defined by Anton LaVey. He took what was a term of a basic epithet of heresy and an insult and made an actual rational philosophy that uses Satan as a symbol, one of pride, liberty, and individualism, rather than some deity to be worshipped. So we are essentially a subset of atheism. He created it as a church because that was a good attention-getting device originally. And indeed, as atheists, we have more of a take on the human equation than most atheists do. They simply don't believe in God, and atheism is scattered all over the board as to where you go from there. Satanism is a particularly misanthropic approach, seeing mankind as just another animal, sometimes better and more often worse than the rest of the ones that live on this planet.
Even dogs and cats, huh?
Oh yes, no, they're often far better than we are.
Well, now, you say your goal is not to mix religion and state, and that's the reason you're opposed to this monument. But doesn't that give you the same goals as the group that wants to put the monument there? Because aren't they putting it there in order to cause an uproar over that issue and perhaps overturn that statute?
Well, you see, they have to then say that. And the real point to that approach is if you tell them that you're doing it just as a lark to get things struck down, then you're struck down as being simply disingenuous or hypocritical. It gets attention because Satan, of course, gets lots of publicity. We know we started that game. But since the Church of Satan has been the preeminent Satanist organization for almost 50 years, the way they're going about it leads people to misunderstand Satanism, and we're the ones who have defined it since it's really begun as an actual religious philosophy.
It sounds like you're kind of a collection of atheists and secularists. So why bring Satan into this at all? What does Satan add to the mix?
Satan adds a very exciting and stimulating symbol. When we look at the legends of Satan, especially from people like Milton or Byron or any of the other romantics who have dealt with him, Carducci, he's shown as an unbowed individualist, one who won't submit to tyranny, one who is proud of being his own captain of his own destiny. And we find that to be inspiring. How could one not? If you're somebody who really feels that you need somebody to tell you what to do, who has to bow to a god or a politician, then we see how that could be frightening, which is also why we Satanists don't proselytize. We believe that Satanism is something that is natural to someone. They read the literature, they see themselves reflected in it. We don't go out there and try to tell people, you should be Satanists, the world would be better if everyone is Satanists. We don't believe that at all. We think that everybody must find the pathway that gives comfort and meaning to them for their lives. But what we advocate is that religions do not use their pathway and try to bludgeon other people with it and think they have the one true way. We don't think we have the one true way, and we don't want to be told by other people that we must submit to somebody else's idea of what that should be.
Magus Peter Gilmore is the High Priest of the Church of Satan. Thank you so much for joining us today, Peter.
Well, thank you for having me back, Maureen. It's a pleasure.
Okay, there's a couple things I want to draw attention to in that conversation. First of all, the dogs and cats thing, I'm pretty sure that I have a dog that's in my house that is way more satanic than I am. I'm pretty sure, yeah. And another thing I'd like to bring attention to is the following.
We don't think we have the one true way.
What, Peter? What was that? What was that you said?
We don't think we have the one true way.
Oh, okay. That makes it more clear. Because I could have sworn that you were saying that you didn't agree with... Wait, that you defined Satanism and that you kind of owned the word. I guess that was my misunderstanding. Okay, well, I guess that resolves that argument. Okay, well, that's resolved. Let's move on to the other problem I had. What about this?
Don't want to be told by other people that we must submit to somebody else's idea of what that should be.
Well, I guess we can agree on that point too, Peter. Other people don't like being told what the definition of their beliefs should be. I'm glad we agree on those two things. Now, why are we fighting again? Why the criticism? I don't get it. I'm getting the sense of a little bit of hypocrisy going on. There's one other point that bothers me. Peter's often made the point that the Satanic Temple is just acting out to gain attention. It's because they're needy, they want attention. Peter, could you remind us why Anton LaVey started the Church of Satan in the first place?
Because that was a good attention-getting device.
Okay, is it just me, or is somebody confused about this stuff we're having a problem with? The Church of Satan can do whatever it wants. That's fine. But when they start misrepresenting or criticizing other organizations, which they have more in common with than not, then I think that it needs to be answered. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm just answering. I'm just replying. Since Peter doesn't seem to want to debate or talk like an adult to people, he just wants to make assumptions and misrepresent them, then this is kind of what we have to do as an option. Because I want it to be clear, nobody wants to be misunderstood. And the Satanic Temple doesn't want to be misunderstood. I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't think there's anyone out there who likes to be misunderstood. Right? Peter Gilmore, well, we've got Satanists working behind the scenes doing satanic work, and we're, whatever, Peter,
Our time is almost here.
Yeah, these frickin' secret agents he's got working behind the scenes doing Satan's work, and who knows? It's like one day they're all going to pop out of the woodwork and go, surprise, we were Satanists the whole time. Now the world's going to change. It's like, what the fuck, dude? Yeah. This funny shit. He's fucking funny. Now, in fairness, I'm going to play the interview on Interfaith Voices, credit to them again, that they did with Lucien Greaves.
If a group called the Satanic Temple gets its way, visitors to the Oklahoma State House will soon be greeted by a 7-foot-tall monument that honors Satan. The proposed statue depicts a goat-headed pagan idol named Baphomet, sitting on a throne with 2 small children gazing up at him. In December, the group applied for a spot right next to the other religious monument at the Capitol, a carving of the 10 Commandments that was added in 2012. Now they've raised nearly $30,000 online, and needless to say, their ode to Satan is causing quite an uproar. It's also sparked a national debate about whether it's okay to put privately funded religious monuments on public property. Lucien Greaves is with us now to tell us why he thinks the Oklahoma State House needs a statue dedicated to the devil. And he's one of the founders of the Satanic Temple, and he joins us from Boston. Welcome to Interfaith Voices, Lucien.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, can you give us a more visual description of the monument that you're hoping to build? What would it look like?
Well, the central character, as you noted, is called Baphomet, and it's a goat-headed androgynous character with a human body and cloven hooves. And the lap can be used as a chair for people to sit on. It's going to be cast in bronze. It has angel wings on the back. Behind is a 7-foot-tall stone slab engraved behind the head of Baphomet with a inverted pentagram, kind of a now universally recognized symbol of Satanism. And the Baphomet is flanked on either side by happy children looking up into its face.
I'm wondering how most people react when they see these plans. And I'm wondering if you could give us a list of words that you've heard people use when they first see this.
Well, it's very polarized, and we intentionally made the image neutral enough that if you didn't have background on Satanism, it would not be repulsive. It would be something you could gravitate towards, or that children could feel comfortable running to and playing on the lap of if they were to do so. Some people, like the electronic musician Moby, described it as adorable, and venues like Salon and I think Time said it was really a work of art. And we've also had other people describe it as repulsive.
So what is your mission? What's the point of doing all this?
We wouldn't want our monument there if there weren't already a 10 Commandments there. Our position, though, is that so long as there is one, it's orders of magnitude better to have more than one, preferably several. With more than one or several or contrasting points of view, I feel that just underscores the pluralistic, inclusive nature of our constitutional liberty.
And later, we're going to be talking to a spokesperson for the Church of Satan. And he actually says you're misrepresenting Satanism, that a true Satanist would be opposed to anything that emulates religion, including a monument like this. So how do you respond to that?
I don't know what that really means, to run a Church of Satan and object to emulating religion. That's nonsensical and contradictory. But from where I come from, the only point of really running an organization is to organize and promote the benefits of your group and your membership. And I feel like that's what we're doing. I don't think the Church of Satan involves themselves in anything like that. I don't know. I don't recall them having been involved in anything lately or for the last 20 years or so. Like we don't really try to micromanage people's beliefs as such. We have our type of activism, and we have kind of our core belief system. But I don't feel anybody can take total ownership of such a broad category as Satanism and say that they have a right conception of what Satanism could be.
What is the status of your statue or your monument at the moment? What are the odds that it will actually be installed at the State House?
Most people look at this and they say that they can't see any way that our monument will ever go up. A lot of legal scholars who look at this case say that they're hard-pressed to find a way in which Oklahoma will turn us down. Whether that means ultimately they'll want to take down the Ten Commandments rather than have ours put up, I just don't know. But I think we really have a solid legal case to make for ours going up, and I think it's an important one to be explored.
Are you prepared to sue if necessary?
Yes.
Lucien Greaves is one of the founders of the Satanic Temple that wants to erect a monument of Baphomet, which is a pagan idol, on the grounds of the Oklahoma State House. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And there you have it. I don't know about you. I kind of enjoyed one interview more than I enjoyed the other. Maybe it's just because I'm biased. Now I'm going to continue the interview that I had with Lucien because I think there's some more interesting substance to the conversation.
Because that was a good attention-getting device.
Yes, that's a good reason too, Peter. Thank you.
It's funny because the one time now that one person hasn't backed out from a debate was a recent Huffington Post Live broadcast where I talked to Representative Wesselhoff from Oklahoma, who from the start of this Oklahoma monument proposal has been making ignorant comments to the press, talking about how this whole satanic monument thing is a ludicrous idea. It will never fly in Oklahoma and that kind of thing. So being that he is an elected representative, even given his comments, I assume he can probably stand up for himself in the debate. So I came in ready, and they asked me about the monument, and I gave this long kind of explanation that I thought would address the issues that Wesselhoff had immediately, because he was talking about how the Ten Commandments have a certain historical place within Oklahoma. And
our laws are based from that.
United States law.
Yeah.
So I started out addressing our own monument and talking about the structure and its historical validity and how it would stand as a monument to those witch-hunted, burned heretics, that kind of thing, the unjustly outcast, who by this trial and error of the witch hunts, we learned to respect secular law. It helped us. It was formative to our respecting the notions of innocence until proven guilty, burden of proof, and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I explained how it's obviously counter-constitutional, the tenets of the Ten Commandments. These are, the fiat and the theocracy. They're not in any way indicative of American law, contemporary or formative.
Yeah.
And then they get Wesselhoff, and he pretends essentially that I didn't say what I said.
I know, he acts like you never said anything.
Yeah. He recites this idea that the Ten Commandments are they have this special legitimacy.
Okay, I'll pause right here and give you an example of exactly what it was that Paul had to say. Mr. Wesselhoff, please, read a book.
It's a pretty persuasive argument that Lucien puts forward, essentially that if you're going to have the Ten Commandments, why can't you have Baphomet? Why can't you have those two there?
Well, like I've said before, the Ten Commandments has historical significance for a building that passes law. The Ten Commandments are fundamental laws that have been adopted in the United States from the beginning, and this is just a way of focusing attention on the Ten Commandments. I think that the monument that they are trying to create is really in rebellion toward the statue of the Ten Commandments. And it won't be lawmakers that really make this decision. It'll be a panel of citizens that are probably appointed to judge and make that decision.
Representative Wesselhoff, is it in rebellion to the Ten Commandments themselves, or is it in rebellion to the separation between church and state not being granted?
It could be in rebellion of probably both, but you know, I just don't think that a panel of citizens in Oklahoma are going to greenlight a satanic statue or whatever it is that they're trying to communicate. I just think it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. But again, that decision won't be made by lawmakers.
Representative Wesselhoff, where do you stand on the Ten Commandments statue being there, whether there is the statue of Baphomet or not?
I don't have any problem at all with the Ten Commandments being posted there. I don't think it's a violation of church and state. Obviously, the ACLU does. They should also petition the Supreme Court and other places that bring a focus on Moses, the lawgiver, and the Ten Commandments. Those things are posted probably in a number of courts throughout the United States, and I guess they would like to have them all removed.
Yes, we would.
But I really don't think that they have a very strong case in that regard.
Great job, Representative Wesselhoff. Great job there.
And he just did so bad. He did so
terrible,
bad.
Yeah.
I couldn't. Did you see that broadcast?
Yeah, and I'm going to include it in the podcast. I'll include a recording of part of it so that people can get an example of how bad it was, because it was like, he's like he had blinders on and he had earplugs in, you know. It's like he wasn't hearing any of it. It's weird. It was surreal almost. I was embarrassed for him.
Yeah. It was amazing. And that's the one actual debate I've had so far.
That's why, because he was too ignorant to know any better. He just didn't know any better.
I don't know. I can't imagine him thinking that he came out looking pretty good in that, or I mean, at one point, when the best he could say was, "Well, that's your opinion. I have mine." That's pretty much conceded.
I think that part of his problem might be that he thinks that the number of people who agree with him somehow strengthens his argument, just because the number of people that he knows around him.
He essentially said as much. He essentially said that it was he didn't know. Nobody had come to him.
You're right. That's it.
But that's when I pointed out that the Ten Commandments were never put to a vote either.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he's feigning ignorance or he's genuinely ignorant to the fact that there are plenty of people in Oklahoma who are offended by the Ten Commandments being there.
I imagine he exists in an echo chamber.
People in Oklahoma who are supportive of our monument, and most of those people are probably supportive of our monument because they're offended by the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Or they otherwise support the notion that if you do open the door to one religious voice, you open them to all. And they want to see that preserved. They want to see that religious pluralism preserved. They understand the constitutional issue. And it was something I brought up on Huffington Post. I know I couldn't prove it there, but it was no lie. We genuinely have gotten that flood of emails from people saying Oklahoma that they agree with what we're doing. I mean, of course, we've gotten the opposite too, but a representative like Wesselhoff doesn't seem to know that there is another side to this story.
Yeah. He's I think he exists in an echo chamber, probably.
Yeah, and it's scary how many of them do. You know, when I was going a little over the edge there, I told him that he had no business being in public office for the fact that he didn't realize, apparently, that he represents voice of all Oklahomans. minority groups or not, whoever they are, not just him pushing his own tribalism.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the nature of public office. And the fact that this should have to be explained to somebody who's in public office is a disgrace.
Yeah, and he's not the only one doing that either. We've seen a lot of that lately in our government. People doing that. They're not representing the people. They're representing their own agenda, whatever they want to push. And it's very, very frustrating.
Yeah, it is. It's graceful. And we get a lot of messages too from people outside of Oklahoma, and they say things like, "Well, what can you expect? It's fucking Oklahoma." The idea that they're all ignorant rednecks over there, but they're not. The people of Oklahoma certainly deserve better than a doddering old idiot like Wesselhoff.
Yep.
I mean, there's plenty of people who don't deserve better in Oklahoma, and they're happy to have him, but there are plenty of people who truly understand the issue here and are supportive.
Yeah, I've got friends in Oklahoma, and they sure as hell don't deserve that guy. I'll tell you that.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of atheists. There's a lot of atheists out there. There's a couple of podcasters from Oklahoma that are very outspoken, and they don't have no tolerance for that kind of shit. They don't have any tolerance for it at all. They're above that, and I think they'd be insulted to have him as a representative. I'm sure they're not happy about it. Yeah.
In places like Oklahoma too, you'll often find a real hardcore of atheist activists, Satanists, or otherwise, because it really means something over there. They're being besieged by this every day. They have somebody like Wesselhoff claiming to represent them, so they're ready to fight the fight.
Exactly, because they've got to be.
It got to the point where we were actually doing an unveiling ceremony in Oklahoma. I think that would just be a massive event. There would be a lot of potential for chaos.
Yes, there would be.
An event.
There would be. I was watching a news broadcast today, or a video today I had posted on Facebook for the Satanic Temple, and it talked about a news broadcast where I had a clip of a news broadcast, and the guy was saying that if they do manage to erect that monument, I've got a pickup truck and a chain, to tear that thing down.
Yeah.
So it's just, it was funny and sad at the same time, because it's so stereotypical. I think it kind of, it's unfair to people in Oklahoma to represent them that way, but the fact is there are some people in Oklahoma that probably will react that way. It's weird.
Oh, yeah. And, we hear from that. The truck and chain thing is really just this kind of soundbite that has really caught on. They want to do violence to the monument.
Hey, man, that's how you pull dead trunks, tree trunks out of the ground, and that's how you steal ATM machines. It's versatile. There's all kinds of shit you can do with that chain in a truck.
Yeah.
Pull monuments down you don't like,
Well, what perplexes me is how many people are asking what's the point, because somebody will come in it with a truck and chain.
No, you can't think like that.
What's the point of doing anything then?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to preemptively concede defeat.
Yep.
If it gets torn down, otherwise it's destroyed and vandalized. I want that to happen. I want to see it happen. I want to know.
Yeah.
So there's a poignant message there too, and it's not going to stop. It's going to generate its own momentum. There's enough people in support of this where it being torn down is going to probably create enough outrage. To build several more monuments, especially once we cast that mold. And that's what we're doing. We're casting a mold of this, and
that's
it'll
awesome.
be significantly cheaper to make.
I would imagine.
Secondary monuments to go around, and there's all these people outraged by the Ten Commandments monument. And as far as I know, none of them have suggested doing violence to the monument itself, tearing it down. Nobody has. Nobody's broken it. Ours is openly this kind of the message of the reconciliation of opposites embodied in
exactly
the binaries of the Baphomet. The one hand pointing above, the one hand pointing below. The hermaphroditic angle is kind of tamped down because we don't want to argue community standards. Abusive is still there. It wasn't in the vice pictures, but that's only because it hadn't been constructed yet.
We were talking on one of my other podcasts about how we suggested maybe should put a camera in there so that you can see people's reactions when they see the monument. Thought that would be a good feed internet feed.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. I wonder what kind of permissions we'd have to get, but it would be worth seeing. Worth seeing people's reaction. I think the best reaction I can see is from people who just aren't familiar with the symbolism at all.
Yeah.
And if I'm right about the design we made, they'll be very interested and curious. I don't think there's anything naturally horrific about the model.
No, there's nothing, I don't think blatantly offensive about it, we're seeing it's just kind of a...
Right. I would like to think that people who don't have this kind of cultural baggage about Satanism, that kind of thing, would look at it and say, that's a very interesting monument.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be...
gravitate toward it rather than away from it.
Yeah, because you're not going to be the Satanist who's screaming in people's faces, kind of demanding anything. It's kind of it's non-threatening, kind of. So that it's not going to turn them off from it. Because it's basically, what we're talking about is turning someone off from the argument right away. Just turning someone off from a discussion just by being negative, and it's not being negative. That sculpture actually invites a conversation to be had where you can actually go back and forth, where that would be them observing it and being interested in it and trying to find out more about it. So I think that's a good aspect of it.
Well, but people have this kind of perception of it. They know it's satanic. So I do have these people saying that it looks hideous, it's demonic, it's frightening, and that kind of thing.
Of course there's that.
And I find that interesting, because you hear the opposite too. You hear other people saying it's beautiful, it's inviting, and that kind of thing, which it's supposed to be. But it's funny to hear these people say how horrific it is, because no doubt, I think they see it that way, but I don't think they realize that they only see it that way because
biases.
They have this idea of what it's supposed to be. Yeah. But what's more interesting to me is how people's perceptions of what I look like have seemed to be changing as I grow into this figurehead character, because I've been on in so much media. And when this first started up, and I was first doing lectures and that kind of thing, I was seeing comments on social media. He doesn't look like a Satanist. That doesn't look the part. Which didn't mean much to me, because what's that supposed to look like?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now it's changed. And people are saying he looks exactly the part. And so there's some thread in social media where these people are saying that they would like to see me play and to be the character cast for Lucifer and the new Constantine.
There you go.
Either a movie or a show, I guess now. But it's just funny, because now they're seeing me as what the Satanist is supposed to look like.
Yeah. Good experiment in human nature, I think. Just that kind of thing, where you see people's perceptions changed by media and just by content, the kind of content that you're representing. It's interesting to see that. I think it's very funny that people are saying, "Oh, you don't look like a Satanist." Then now they're saying, "Hey, you could play a Satanist on TV."
Well, and then they pick out like any idiosyncratic item, and it becomes indispensable to the image. Like, I mean, for me, the idea of being somebody on TV or in pictures as a spokesperson just kind of seemed out of the question, because I have a scarred eye. My right eye is scarred. It's scarred over with scar tissue. That pretty much cuts you out of acting careers or anything like that. And generally should probably cut you out of being a face person for an organization. But now you see these comments saying, the eye, that's satanic.
That's what it is. That's interesting. That works. It's funny.
Well, and I've seen some people discussing whether it's the real thing or that's image,
Exactly.
Try.
If it's a prop or not.
Right.
You did it to yourself on purpose. You're a Satanist, right? So you must have done it to yourself on purpose.
Exactly.
The dagger slipped. The dagger slipped one day, and that was it. That was it for his eye. So now he's got this hideous, he's got this mark. Or it's the mark of the beast, too. It could be that.
Yeah, well, now it's a thing to have.
Yeah, add that to the list of things, possibilities.
Who doesn't want a scarred eye now?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be the end thing. You know, I almost wouldn't put it past people to do that. Some of the crazy shit they're doing these days. I don't get it. I mean, I'm old. I know I'm getting old. I can, you know, admit that, you know, I can live with it. But some of the shit I see these kids doing to their bodies, putting these gauges in their cheeks and shit like that, it's just, I don't get that. It's really, really strange. When you can see through somebody's mouth, I mean, like a window.
I have one tattoo. That's it. And I do wonder about some of the skin stretching. You know, the huge gauges and
modifications that are just unnatural. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you know, if that goes out of fashion for you, you get tired of it, or your ear starts getting caught on things.
Or small rodents start building nests in it. That kind of thing.
So you're just going to have that extra skin. Something's going to... Well, I'm sure they have the procedures well worked out. You know,
I'm sure.
Maybe
and I don't
it's not
want
that difficult to do, but still.
I don't want to knock anybody for doing it, because if it floats your boat, that's fine with me. But it just you gotta realize that some people are gonna think that that's maybe a little bit odd. You are listening to the Modern Satanism Podcast. We'll hear more of that conversation I had with Lucien a little bit later on. In the meantime, a group of Christians say Wales' national flag is demonic and should be changed. The Welsh Christian Party claims the red dragon on the nation's standard is at odds with the country's position as a Christian nation and wants the flag to be replaced with the black and gold cross of St. David. Party leader, the Reverend George Hargreaves, said a symbol of the devil should not reign over Wales for another moment. He said, Wales is the only country in history to have a red dragon on its national flag. This is the very symbol of the devil described in the book of Revelation 12:3. This is nothing less than the sign of Satan, the devil, Lucifer, that ancient serpent who deceived Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The party has launched an online petition calling for a referendum to allow the Welsh people to decide which flag they would prefer. Historians and even Christians say the symbol of the dragon had a long tradition in Wales and was a source of pride. Welsh historian John Davies said, it's been part of our tradition for more than 1,500 years. On the other hand, the flag of St. David has a much more specific remit. When you see the Welsh flag, you know what it is. It's recognizable in the same way the Union Jack or the Stars and Stripes are. What's the point of changing it now? Bishop David Yeoman said few Christians in Wales would associate the dragon with the devil. He said, the dragon is a very ancient symbol in Wales. I doubt whether most Christians would see it as demonic. They see it as a symbol of the past. Gregory Barker, acting as the head of School of Theology and Religious Studies at Trinity College, Corinthian, said many Christian countries had flags without a specific religious symbol on them. He added, what's most important is that the flag symbolizes citizens. Graduating senior Jake Thompson showed up at the Urbandale School Board meeting earlier this month, this is in Iowa, to advocate for students who worship Satan as part of their religion. The students should be able to wear t-shirts that represent their beliefs just like anyone else, he said. The district's student code specifically prohibits satanic symbols. It might have been time for most students to take their diplomas and think of high school as history, but Thompson wasn't done yet. He returned to Monday's school board meeting and brought along other recent graduates to echo their beliefs that students should be allowed religious freedom in the dress code. 4 students addressed the school board on the topic. Although none said they actually knew any Satan worshippers, they believe students with that belief should have the same religious freedoms as any other student. They didn't have any response to me last time, so we decided to come with a larger group, said Thompson, who described himself as an atheist. Somebody had to say this, and we're the ones who stepped out for the minorities. Other supporters, all from the class of 2014, were Paige Danefelt, a Catholic, Sam Plank, an agnostic, and Sarah Leonhardt, a Lutheran. Thompson spoke for the group, which appeared during the public comment section of the meeting. The dress code laid out on the Urbandale School District's website indicates any clothing displaying, expressing, or promoting or implying the use of alcohol, drugs, or tobacco is prohibited. Clothing interpreted as expressing, promoting, or implying obscenity, profanity, vulgar statements, satanic symbols, gang symbols, hate messages, sexual innuendo, suicide, intolerance, or violent messages may not be worn. Thompson said he believes the satanic concern to be out of place. There's a difference between stating one's belief and obscenity, he said. This is a religion like any other, and it needs to have the same rights. Plank said while he agreed that a dress code of some kind should be in place at the school to encourage certain sense of modesty, he failed to see how unfairly marginalizing a particular religious belief accomplishes that goal. I've had worries about coming forward about this, but I could care less what people think, Plank said. I think this is something people should have the freedom to believe. The item was not on the school board's agenda, so it was not debated. I did send Jacob a message telling him thank you for standing up for what he thought was right. Not necessarily just Satanism, but because it was the right thing to do. I'd like to see more of that happen, where people have a concern for things just because they're right, not because they are directly affected by it. Union County, Kentucky. A Union County student was jailed Thursday after allegedly writing satanic threats on school property. The Union County Sheriff's Office charged Kayla Von Shears, 19, with second-degree terrorist threatening. She was lodged at the Union County Detention Center. Von Shears, a junior at Union County High School, is accused of writing threats on bathroom stalls at the school. The threats were satanic in nature and indicated something criminal was going to happen to a member of the school. On Friday, according to court documents, Sheriff Mickey Arnold said the threats were drawn with an upside-down cross and blood and mentioned Satan. Officials said the threat stemmed from someone running into Boshears. Further information wasn't immediately available. Now here's some more of the conversation I had with Lucien. Let's talk about the Black Mass again a little bit.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to.
Well, yeah, I got sick of the topic immediately. I think I was telling you earlier, it was one thing that I, unfortunately, from the very start, didn't give that much a shit about. It was something that was nice to see happen, but I was still getting monument media and trying to explain the position on the monument, which is something I take very seriously, and that's a fight we have coming up, and I want to be very clear on that issue, and that's the kind of media I wanted to take. The Black Mass is supposed to be an event for us and people interested in the Black Mass.
Yeah.
I knew there would inevitably be people pissed off at the idea of a Black Mass at Harvard. So, we even tried to bypass that, and we're clear on our flyers. This is a reenact of a Black Mass, which kind of goes without saying, given what a Black Mass is supposed to entail.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have at least a defrocked priest, actual nuns engaging in this kind of thing.
Yeah.
At other levels, you're supposed to have candles made of baby fat, and the devil's supposed to appear, which is Sabbath mythology, that's converted over into this kind of particular Catholic imagery. But we're also very clear on the flyer that this was an academic and historical presentation. We were talking about it. It was done in the name of the Satanic Temple because we also wanted to explain the idea of embracing blasphemy and how this idea of the Black Mass is embraced by some Satanists who feel the need to engage in that kind of blasphemous behavior as a declaration of personal independence against whatever cultural programming that was leveled upon them. Judeo-Christian for the people who care anything about the idea of Black Mass. So it's not about a targeted offensive against Catholicism, but of course the Boston Archdiocese got up in arms, and Catholics in general
did they ever
went crazy. Yeah, they never reached out, to us to find out what
that's an important point I think that needs to be made, is they didn't reach out to you to even try and communicate with you about any issues they may have.
The amount of shutout was ridiculous, to the point that when I was on MSNBC to talk about the monument and the Black Mass, they had a Catholic representative on. He refused also to be on the same time as me. He also had to be a separate interview. He wouldn't debate me about it. It's absurd because they make all these kinds of accusations against us about what they presume we were trying to do, but they never even bothered to ask.
Yeah. And it was a reenactment too. I mean, if you have a problem with the reenactment, how can you have a problem with it? And if you are going to, you better tell the Civil War soldiers they have doing those Civil War reenactments, because that's a pretty bad period of time. We don't want reenacting that either. It's kind of, it amazes me.
The comparison they like to make, and that the guy kept repeating on MSNBC because he had nothing better to offer, was, what if it was some kind of anti-Semitic reenactment, or if it was a reenactment of a KKK lynching, or that kind of thing. And the thing is as the professor who actually did debate the Catholic on MSNBC was saying, one thing wasn't advocating violence against anybody, and the Catholics can't really claim to be this kind of maligned minority group, especially in the face of the Satanists here.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah.
my position, what made their complaint so offensive to me was that the idea of the Black Mass actually roots from the Catholic Church's own hate speech. It was propaganda they used to justify murdering dissenters.
Yep.
Labeling them as witches or heretics, and justifying their torture and murder by claiming they would engage in these horrific ceremonies in which they would murder babies and copulate with the devil and do all kinds of...
And working against science also, yeah, a lot of science.
Yeah. So them claiming that it's hate speech against them, I was using the analogy of African-American hip-hop artists and poets who use the word nigger. They co-opt it in a way and try to recontextualize it and disempower it, and they use it towards their own end. And that would be like the white racists saying that, the hip-hop artists and the poets are are utilizing hate speech against them because they're glorifying a group that they're convinced is trying to rape their women and steal their property. How offensive it is to me to hear some Catholic group claiming that the whole Black Mass thing is hate speech against them.
Yeah. And it's not even, they took it so personal, is what it is. Part of the problem is it wasn't a personal thing.
It got to the point where they were so willfully ignorant of what we were saying about what we were actually doing that it occurred to me that they weren't going to give up on this idea that it was a targeted offensive against them because they wanted it to be that. It made them feel relevant. I mean, the Boston Catholic community, the last big event they had was the pedophilia scandal.
Yeah.
So this was a welcome diversion.
Yeah, here we go. This is a good example of how they had that problem in 2002, and just this last December, the Pope finally got together a task force to address pedophilia and discuss it. I mean, it's taken how many years? And if they're going to have 60,000 signatures and a protest against a Black Mass, where are those people at when you've got children who are being their lives destroyed by people that they were supposed to be able to trust as much as their parents? If not, they were entrusted. They entrusted those people, and they betrayed them and abused their children, and then the church ignored it and denied it and ignored it and denied it. And finally, what do we got? 12 years later, decides that they're going to put a task force together, and they've never even accepted the blame until I think maybe last month, finally one of the popes did accept, they had apologize, but they still want to say that it's evil, and blame it on Satan, and it's not address the real issue, the underlying issue of the problem. And for those people to be upset about a Black Mass and not be as pissed, if not more, I mean, it's amazing to me how they could be thinking.
Well, there's another disturbing aspect of their complaints about the Black Mass too, especially when they say that the Black Mass traditionally was this kind of ceremony that disparaged them and desecrated the consecrated host.
Yeah.
What's implicit in that is that they believe their early propaganda about the Black Mass, and they're still kind of purveying this conspiracy theory of witches and satanic cults in the background committing these bizarre murders. It shows that they're still holding fast to these sick demonologies of theirs.
Yeah.
And that is the really disturbing part to me. At no point did they come forward and say that, this was based on some kind of conspiracy fears from the past.
Yeah.
No, they were taking it as a given that this was an existing practice from a bloodlusting group of people from the past.
An active threat to Catholics everywhere.
Yeah, that was actually part of the rhetoric. And there was this bizarre concentration upon the idea of whether or not we were using a consecrated host. And I was in a weird position with the media, because on the one hand, I wanted to make it clear that this wasn't a targeted offensive against Catholics, that we weren't setting out to provoke or offend them. But on the other hand, I wanted to make it clear that I didn't give a fuck that they were offended. I didn't give a fuck if they were I didn't give a fuck about their concerns about magic bread
Yeah.
You know,
Because it's just stupid.
I didn't want to. I just could not express sympathy over those concerns, and especially, you know, it may seem facile to harp on the pedophilia thing, but when you have those kinds of actual problems in your own house, and your major concern is if we've insulted a piece of bread or not, I just cannot sympathize.
And the only reason we can harp on that or stay on that topic about the pedophilia is because they haven't done anything to address it. I mean, I would like it so that we couldn't say anything about it because they dealt with it, and it really wouldn't be fair to bring that subject, because they've done something active about it. They haven't done shit. That's why it keeps getting brought up. If they don't like it being brought up, maybe they should do something about it so that people will be more comfortable with the way they've dealt with it, because it's their own fault. You know, it needs to be brought up until they resolve it.
Well, that's what I was wondering. See, the venue was moved originally for the Black Mass. Moved to a venue called the Middle East, where we would have been able to fit everybody in and do whatever we wanted, and it was off Harvard campus. And then, for reasons they've never elaborated upon, the Middle East pulled out. Like 2 hours before the event, I was at the Middle East, which is, a club kind of venue, and they serve food and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was there doing an interview with a kid who writes for Harvard's paper, The Crimson, and while I'm interviewing with them, I'm sitting near the window of the Middle East, and this whole army of Catholics was marched by in a procession. They're holding candles, and they're holding these signs and these big tarps above their head. It was just very elaborate, and they're very serious, and some of them were even crying, and it was this massive outpouring of protest against the Black
Wow,
Mass.
someone must have been doing something terrible to them. Yeah.
Yeah, the papers give differing accounts, but I guess there was a good 1,500 people or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, wow, some of these people might be able to recognize me on sight. Looking anything up. So I sat and watched them pass by, and it really is kind of humorous to see these people actually crying about this.
Yeah.
That's how invested they are. Yeah. And still, I can't feel any sympathy for it whatsoever. But they couldn't be mobilized for anything nearly similar with the pedophilia scandal.
Nope. It was crickets
chirping.
They
all stayed indoors then.
Yeah.
But the idea that a piece of bread was being used the wrong way, or that a symbol might be held in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I mean, that's truly disturbed magical thinking.
It is very, and I find it very disturbing, because there's just
openly and shamelessly be on the march on its behalf. It's really disturbing.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. He should have seen something, an outcrying, over the problems that they have, rather than an outcrying over, like you said, a piece of bread. That's what it comes down to, and. And a piece of bread that I specified wasn't magical by their standards. yeah, exactly. And it should be enough that it was a reenactment to chill people out. I mean, I don't understand how anybody could be so against something that's a reenactment. I mean, it's amazing to me.
Well,
it's just,
I imagine that they are simple-minded enough that if we had built it in such a way where we said it was going to be a live stage performance of the film Haxan, they would have never been in an uproar. And Haxan is a film from the 20s, a silent film that was about the witches' Sabbath, and showed these kinds of ceremonies that were supposed to take place. No, not really a whole lot different from what we were doing. Haxan is a great film if you haven't seen it. It's the full film. It's Haxan, and it gives a very academic kind of background. One of the best silent films there is.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, was they being an uproar if that film was being replayed at one of the local independent theaters? Surely not. What's the big difference? If it's a stage performance, is that a big difference?
Exactly. That's a good point.
Apparently so. I guess maybe it was because it was the Satanic Temple without Satanists.
I guess.
I don't know. But you'd still think there was enough question there that they would have at least bothered to reach out to us to ask.
Yeah.
But nobody took that kind of high ground. About as low as it gets, though, and I would have never watched this as over at somebody else's place and insisted on running the whole thing.
Yeah.
That disgusting slob Alex Jones sent another bloated, disgusted slob of his, the same one who he had interrupt the mayor's speech after the Boston Marathon bombing to claim that the whole thing was a false flag operation. Alex Jones ran a report about the Black Mass, and it's almost humorous if you can laugh about this idiot, how wrong he gets things. But Alex Jones is claiming that Harvard shut the whole thing down because the Satanists ran amok in the church and started destroying things. Their eyes were literally glowing, and
wow, sounds scary.
Are you familiar with Alex Jones?
I am not, but I will be educated on him by this evening.
Oh, he's been around for some time.
I don't know. I might have seen him before.
One of the Boston bombers listened to him quite a bit. He's
one of those.
He runs InfoWars. He's just this raving, idiotic conspiracy.
Is he like O'Reilly and like Limbaugh, that kind of ilk, where they're?
He had some kind of bone of contention with Glenn Beck, where he was claiming that Glenn Beck was stealing his material, which is funny because if you're dealing in fact, you're not really dealing with stolen material.
Yeah, it's all made up anyways.
Somebody could come into the same conclusions quite easily if you're dealing with fact. But since they're dealing with stuff that's entirely made up, he was offended that Alex Jones is a FEMA death camps kind of guy.
Nice.
And he's been at it for like 20 years, and he's always claiming that the apocalypse is right around the corner.
Does he really believe it though, or is he just doing it because he likes to rile people up and for shock value and ratings and shit like that? Because that's what always sickened me about O'Reilly's. I know he doesn't believe some of the shit he says. He does it just for ratings, just to get people riled up. And he's dangerous, in my opinion. But
oh yeah, well O'Reilly's hardly the worst to him. He definitely has to check out.
He's a total dick, man.
Strikes me as really stupid enough to believe what he's talking about, and not even be cognizant enough to realize he's been saying this every day for some 20 years or whatever, and it's never come to pass.
He's brainwashed himself.
Yeah. We're always just at the edge.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the system that's behind the Satanic Temple, the belief system, or the do I call it a belief system? I don't know if I'm comfortable calling it a belief system.
I don't know that I'm comfortable calling it a belief system.
Yeah, what would we call it? We call it
good question.
The moral high ground that we take.
Right. Kind of organizational system, really.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what we set up. It's kind of that's what I feel we set up. It's the organizational behavior.
Yeah.
Different people have asked about holding differing religious beliefs even and being involved with the Satanic Temple, which is interesting to me that they even asked. But I really am not concerned with micromanaging the varieties of beliefs, but I think as an organization, to get anywhere, I think, even individually as a person to get anywhere, and people disagree, will disagree, you have to behave or think atheistically. It's like, it's a scientific mindset.
Yeah.
You can't say anything for sure without empirical evidence, that kind of thing. You don't have a carte blanche to say just because we don't know that you can act in some other way.
You're not allowed to fill in that gap.
So, but at least as far as an organizational system goes, I think, it's necessary to take an atheistic stance.
Yeah.
Degenerate occultism or whatever. But, so long as people aren't wanting to argue various theistic points or whatever else, and they find common cause with the campaigns we're doing, that kind of thing, happy to allow them to do so. And I think people will move in and out from the organization with their level of activity,
of
course. And that's fine. And some campaigns will resonate with people and some won't. But we're definitely more interested in engaging in the socio-political dialogue than anything else. I'm really not interested in anything else.
Yeah.
And that's another spot, I think, where we depart from any of the other satanic organizations. Is we're not dedicated to setting up a silly multi-tiered hierarchy, which is really just there for the titles, just for the names, and setting up this kind of autocratic structure where people need to pledge fealty to a central authority, because to me that's completely antithetical to what drives people to self-identify as Satanists to begin with. The kind of personal liberation philosophy. So for that matter, I think think we just necessarily can't take a strong arm approach on micromanaging people's beliefs and behavior.
Yeah, I would agree, because there's so many instances where people differ on points or on issues, and neither one of them's wrong. You know, it happens
right.
Where more than one person can be right, but you can have differing opinions, and I think that it's important that people realize that just because someone doesn't agree with exactly with what you're saying or think the same way as you do doesn't make them wrong. It makes them different, but that's not default to making them wrong. It's not the way it works.
We're really in no position to start splitting hairs on what exactly somebody has to say or do or believe to take common cause with us, because we are such an unrecognized minority. And if we can take common cause on things that will benefit us in general, we damn well better do it now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And not worry about superfluous details if we don't have to.
Yeah. And not to be apocalyptically speaking, but there are some things coming up in the future due to technology and advances that we're making where we're going to have to take a serious look at our the way we look at moral values and the way we look at the ethics that we have, because the technology is going to give us the ability to do some amazing things in the very near future that are going to challenge us as a species as a whole, you know, the things we'll be able to do. And I think that we need to start getting ready for being able to make important decisions and do them in a way that's fair to everyone. And it's just, personally, I find it very scary what's coming up, but I also find it very exciting too, because there's a lot of good things coming up, you know, but it's also going to be a test.
I think it should be horrifying to our economists and politicians who seem very ignorant to the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the way of the music field is the way of all industry eventually, when things are going to be available at such low cost or free to, you know, for the price of internet subscription or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a big question, like, do we preserve people's ability to online anonymity, or are people going to get paid for their minor contributions to everything they put online?
Yeah.
You know, right now you have so many institutions or whoever else collecting data on you, and you get no payback for that. There's like no micro payment plugged into your account for these for the usage of this data you keep putting in. And so many more organizations and operations are finding ways to just entirely crowdsource everything for free entirely.
Yeah.
So, and you know, then the more 3D printing becomes a thing, you know. Is it that outrageous that someday people will be able to download a car? You know, the argument was, you wouldn't steal somebody's car, would you download this music or whatever?
Yeah.
Maybe it'll get to that point, and what do we do? You know, do we find a new economic system, or do we find a way to make everybody get paid for their minor contributions in whatever way, micropayments or what?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what we do with questions like if you can make it so that people can hear a conversation from across the room, or where people can see how many people outside of your house, how many people are in your house and where they're at, or hear what they're saying. Or when you can point a device at someone and tell whether they're telling the truth or not when they're speaking, which are things that are actually we'll be able to do in the near future. I mean, we're not very far away from being able to do those things. In fact, we can tell the line thing.
There was that recent case of a guy, there's a recording of him speaking in his own living room. He said something racist.
Yeah.
And at what point are you exonerated for saying such a thing when you said it in your own living room?
Exactly. And I've heard a couple of people, or read a couple of things that they're talking about the kids that are being born, the people who are children today are going to be used to a world with no privacy whatsoever. They're not going to have any privacy. They're just going to just be used to it, you know?
Well, I mean, maybe there will be a positive angle to that, too. Maybe
I hope
finally, getting laid won't be the highest crime. Because it's, you know, I've worked on putting together material about quack therapists and doctors, too.
Yeah.
And it seems like they can outright murder patients of theirs, so overdrugging them or you know, stilling them with false memories of the most ridiculous type and ruining their lives.
Yeah.
They don't lose their licenses for that. They fuck a client of theirs, they're out immediately. I mean, you see that also with politics. You know, you can lie to get a nation into war. You can engage in insider trading and give no bid contracts to your company.
Yeah.
But, you know, you go off and fuck a hooker, then
get a
you're
blowjob.
problem.
Yeah.
and that's the one problem you've caused that really has no effect on everybody else. You know, that has the least ramifications for society as a whole.
And it's, definitely the least negative effects on other people.
All right, so if everybody's losing their privacy to that degree, finally somebody's going to have to say, you know what? Everybody's getting laid.
That's the one thing that gives me hope, is that for everything that I worry about, there's also a positive aspect to it too. I don't mean to be negative, but there's also some incredibly positive things we'll be able to do too. So hopefully the good will win out over the evil. So maybe whatever evil is.
It troubles me, the idea that the trend will be towards individual transparency, but a complete government blackout.
Yeah.
It should be the other way around. I think the government should be transparent. People's own private lives be as private as they want them to be.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's quite aware of the other campaigns we did. And, you know, it's taken a lot of effort to put together this Oklahoma campaign.
Yeah.
And that kind of slowed me down on other things because I've really tried to keep up with media on that. And I'm talking to different people about possible legal representation for that because we need to move forward soon. But the Protect Children thing is something we wanted to utilize having a religious organization for from the start, which was, you know, we wrote in the tenet that the body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. And 19 states still allow schools to beat kids.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, and they let them beat them brutally, too, to the point that if the parents were to beat them the same way, leave those kinds of marks that they're allowed to leave schools, they'd be charged with felony.
Yeah.
In all over the nation, they allow now these seclusion rooms, you know, solitary confinement.
Yeah,
and the empirical evidence is all against it. There's no corrective benefit to this, and it only has adverse effects on cognitive development, behavioral development, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this shouldn't be done in the civilized world. So what we were trying to do to detract from that. Interestingly, the argument for it often, if you press people, will be biblical. You know, they'll
surprise
this idea of spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be amazed at how often that's brought into play as, you know, biblical law. You can beat the kids if you want. But our feeling is that we can offer a First Amendment exemption, religious liberty exemption, meaning that we do have this tenet. And we also think that we can get away with not forcing people to self-identify as Satanists to claim this exemption, which just mean that we're in a unique position, meaning that this, the body's inviolability is fundamental in our tenets.
Yeah.
We're in a unique position to argue that this isn't just some kind of claim of convenience for people. This does qualify as a deeply held belief on a religious level, where anybody who shares that belief can be exempted, like conscientious objector from war. You know, so we made this letter available where kids give us their name or fill it out. Otherwise, we submit it to the school district or school board or the principal of the school. I don't even know which. We vetted this through lawyers, so.
Yeah.
And we put the school on notice that you just can't beat this kid, and we'll take action if you do. So, you know, I know this campaign didn't get much press, but I feel like if they test us on this, it definitely will.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing we will go in full guns blazing, and I would hope we could ruin some careers and destroy some lives if they go ahead and beat one of the kids who's exonerated.
Yeah, I can't believe they still allow that in so many states. You know.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. I mean, there's a better way to handle this kind of thing.
Absolutely, there is. Yeah. And what's up with this with the solitary confinement thing? Is that supposed to be like the ultimate timeout? Is that what they're thinking that's all about, or what? Is that what they're thinking?
Yeah, these scary closet-sized padded rooms that they throw these kids in. You know, we've had video footage and really distressing. And people talk about these things being responsibly used and you know, in the best case scenario or whatever. But I really don't have faith in our public educators to ever. For one thing, I don't believe it's ever useful. It's not really helpful at all.
I can't see how it would be.
But you know, take something like tasers. You know, you give them to cops, and I think too often they don't they don't consider some of the psychological problems.
Absolutely, they don't. Yeah.
Yeah, they say it's non-lethal. They still say that to this day.
Yeah, and there's, what's funny about that is there's no way for them to know whether it's going to be lethal or not because they don't know the person's medical history or their conditions beforehand. It's like rolling the dice with someone's life.
People are dying all the time.
Yeah.
People are, you set your Google or it's just something that will pick up on it.
And don't tase me, bro.
All the time.
Search it. Yeah.
And the thing is people will whip out the taser for nothing too.
Yeah,
it's the non-lethal thing. It's just to them, it's
like a spray bottle. It's like a water bottle or something sprayed in somebody's face, kind of. It's not that.
Right. Yeah. It's their first line of defense sometimes, even before asking somebody to calm down or whatever.
Exactly right. They tase them first, and then they talk to them. Yeah.
And people are falling, cracking their heads and dying, or they have a heart condition, they end up dying. People are always dying of tasers, and it's because they've never wised up about this, and you have idiots using it like it's nothing.
Yep. Let me get this.
I'll be around. I'll talk to you soon.
Sweet. Okay, man.
All right. Thanks.
Later.
Bye.
Pope Francis on Monday branded sexual abuse of children by priests a crime comparable to a satanic mass and said he would show zero tolerance for anyone in the Catholic Church who abused children, including bishops. Speaking to reporters on the plane taking him back from a visit to the Middle East, the Pope also announced that he would have his first meeting with a group of abuse victims at the Vatican early next month. Only took 12 years. Asked about whether he would move against bishops who were accused of sexual abuse, he said there will be no daddy's boys and no privileges, adding that 3 bishops were currently under investigation. Sexual abuse is such an ugly crime because a priest who does this betrays the body of the Lord. It is like a satanic mass, he said in some of the toughest language he has used on the crisis, which has rocked the church for more than a decade. We must go ahead with zero tolerance, he said. He said he would hold a meeting with around 8 victims of sexual abuse at the Vatican early next month. It would be attended by Cardinal Sean Patrick O'Malley of Boston, who's been busy protesting reenactments of the Black Mass, but found time to head a commission set up to study ways of dealing with the crisis. Francis, who spoke to reporters for nearly an hour, said the victims, several from Europe, would attend his morning mass and then he would meet with them. It will be the first time for Francis to meet sexual abuse victims since his election in March of 2013. Well, considering that this abuse scandal started in Boston, actually, it began in Boston in 2002, he's doing pretty good, time-wise. And considering that it's been 50 years, some of these cases go back 50 years, the abuse, he's doing really good, comparing it to a satanic mass. Really, Pope? Really? Fuck. How is anybody Catholic still? How does that happen? I don't understand. And I think we're going to wrap up this podcast with that last news item there, except for a few details that I'd like to share with you. I hope you enjoyed this first podcast. The next one will be probably in a couple weeks, unless I get an extraordinary amount of feedback and demands to put out a podcast on a weekly basis. Then I'll do that. But for now, we're just going to do the every other week thing. Now, if you know anyone you'd like to hear as a guest on the podcast, or if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, there's an open invitation to any and all, as long as you have something that is interesting to us Satanists. If there's a topic or a subject you'd like me to cover, let me know. There's a contact form on the website for the podcast, modernsatanism.net. You can contact me through there. You can also find me on Facebook, Reap Payton. And I'd like to encourage you to visit the Satanic Temple, thesatanictemple.com, and feel free to donate there to help support any of the current projects they have going on. And you're more than welcome to donate to this podcast if you'd like to continue to hear it going on. If you enjoyed it, if you got something from it, feel free to support the podcast. There's a donate button on the website. That's modernsatanism.net. I'll conjure you up another podcast in a couple weeks. Hail Satan.
So here comes Satanism, which most of us would like to write off as harmless antics by some lunatic fringe. A few years ago maybe, but not now.